Let's do it. Ready for a deep dive into the future? Well, one very specific vision of it, at least. You guys wanted to hear about this, Chris Westland.
Chris Westland, yeah.
Yeah, and I gotta say, he's not a big name like Kurzweil or somebody.
Right. Not like your usual futurist.
Not like your super mainstream futurist, but that's actually what I think makes this deep dive kind of interesting. It's sort of a peek into how one person, and he's clearly done his homework, he's drawing on history, he's drawing on modern trends, just kind of thinking deeply about what might be coming. And he's not afraid to say some pretty bold stuff. So we are diving into an article from Westland's personal website called Simply the Future.
Simply the future. Love it.
Straightforward.
Straight to the point.
Yeah. And he breaks it down into three sort of big pillars of his thinking. And we're going to try to cover all three today. Tribes, empires, and technology. And I'm telling you, he makes some really bold predictions, especially when we get to that technology part.
Yeah, some really interesting ones. And I think what really struck me right off the bat was just how Westland frames his predictions. He's not presenting himself as some kind of, all-knowing prophet with like a crystal ball. It's more like he's weaving together this tapestry of historical insights, current trends, to create this really compelling and sometimes unsettling picture of what may lie ahead.
Yeah, and he does it in such an approachable way. He's really a great writer.
Yeah.
Really engaging. But okay, let's start with his ideas about tribes. So he makes this kind of provocative claim that for all of our technological advances, that, as humans, we're still driven by the same, I guess, primal instincts that ruled our ancestors 200,000 years ago.
Back on the savannah.
Back on the African savannah. I mean, think about that, like 200,000 years ago. And he even points out, and this was kind of a mind blower for me, that our brains have actually shrunk by 10% since then.
Isn't that wild?
I mean, does that mean we're getting dumber? I mean, seriously.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, it's not necessarily about intelligence in a traditional sense. What he's really highlighting is how those deep-seated tribal instincts, while they were totally essential for survival, back in our evolutionary past when we were running around on the savannah trying not to get eaten by lions.
Right.
They can actually hinder our ability to effectively solve problems in today's world. We're still wired for this us versus them thinking, even when the them isn't a rival tribe. It's something like a global pandemic or climate change or.
Right, or even just, the other political parties. It's like we're still stuck in that tribal mindset.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you remember this, but he has this one example in the article that I found both funny and kind of disturbing at the same time, where he talks about how we declare war on abstract things. Like we declare war on cancer.
Oh, yeah.
Or we declare war on poverty. It's
Yeah.
like we haven't really evolved past that tribal mentality. We've just upgraded our weapons.
Exactly. And I think that's such a crucial point, for anyone listening to really consider. We might not be facing off against, rival clans with spears and shields anymore, but that wiring is still there,
Right.
and it's influencing our behavior. It's shaping how we interact with the world. I mean, think about how this plays out in your own life. How do your affiliations, your political affiliations, your social groups, even brand loyalty, how do those things influence your decisions, your perceptions of the world? Like, are you aware of those ingrained biases?
It's such a powerful question, and one I think we all need to think about more,
Yeah.
especially in this age of social media where those tribal lines are constantly being reinforced.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about Westland's perspective on empires, because he says something really, really bold, and it was kind of a head-scratcher for me at first. He calls religion the original technology for building empires. I'll be honest, my first reaction was like, whoa, okay, that's a little bit out there.
Yeah.
But the more I thought about it, the more I kind of saw where he was coming from.
Yeah, it's a provocative statement, but he backs it up with some really fascinating arguments. His central point is that religion, with its shared beliefs and rituals and hierarchical structures, it provided this really crucial mechanism for organizing and controlling large groups of people, something that becomes increasingly challenging, as societies grow beyond a certain size.
Yeah, and he specifically mentions Dunbar's number, which, if I remember correctly, is that sort of theoretical limit
Yes.
of stable social relationships that our brains can handle, which is like right around 150 people.
Yeah, right around there.
So anything beyond that, you need some kind of external structure to hold things together, right?
Exactly. And Westland's argument is that religion, for much of human history, it served that function. It created a sense of shared identity, shared purpose, a framework for morality, social order, and it allowed empires to expand and thrive far beyond what would have been possible if you were just relying on personal relationships.
It's almost like he's saying that religion was the original social media.
Hmm.
I mean, think about it. It provided entertainment, a sense of belonging, a platform for sharing ideas, values.
That's a great analogy.
Instead of, scrolling through Instagram, our ancestors were gathering in temples and churches.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And just like today's social media landscape, religions weren't these static entities, They
Yeah.
evolved, they adapted, sometimes they even competed for followers. And Westland tells this really fascinating anecdote about Constantine the Great, the Roman emperor.
Oh, yeah. The guy who made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire?
That's the one.
What's the anecdote?
So before he landed on Christianity, Constantine actually went through this phase of exploring other belief systems.
Well, interesting.
Including Mithraism. There was a sun god cult called Sol Invictus.
He was shopping around.
He's shopping around, yeah, and it really highlights how religion was often intertwined with power and politics, a tool that was used by rulers to kind of consolidate their authority.
That's a fascinating point. So what does Westland have to say about religion in the modern world where technology is so deeply embedded in our lives? What does he think is going on now?
Well, this is where things get even more intriguing, I think. He argues that religion hasn't disappeared, it's simply morphed and adapted to the digital age.
Okay.
And he even goes so far as to say that modern religions are weaponizing technology for mind control.
Wait, hold on. Mind control. That sounds a little like a sci-fi thriller or something.
I know. It's a bold claim.
Yeah.
But think about it in the context of, how we interact with technology every day.
You're right. I mean, algorithms are already shaping our online experiences. They're curating the news we see, the products we buy, even the people we connect with. It's a little creepy when you think about it that way.
It is a little creepy. It's not so much about overt mind control, like some evil genius is programming our thoughts, It's more about subtle influence, shaping perceptions, nudging our behaviors in ways that honestly, we may not even be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And he points to things like targeted advertising, personalized news feeds, the rise of influencer culture,
Oh, yeah.
as examples of how technology can be used to kind of manipulate our desires and beliefs.
It's almost like those suggested for you posts on social media or like the new sermons, right?
It's true.
Tailored messages designed to resonate with our specific fears and aspirations. It's pretty deep.
Yeah.
And that, I guess, brings us to his next big prediction, the one that really caught my attention when I first read this article. The singularity.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
He believes that artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence as early as 2045.
Right.
Now, before you picture, a Terminator-style robot apocalypse,
Right.
I want to emphasize that the singularity doesn't necessarily have to be a dystopian scenario.
Yeah.
It might not be all killer robots and, the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah, and he acknowledges that fear. A lot of people have that fear about AI. They're afraid of losing control, of being replaced,
Becoming obsolete.
or even eradicated. Right.
Eradicated, yeah.
And he points out that this fear often comes from a misunderstanding of what the singularity really means.
And to be honest with you, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. I'm not sure I fully understand it either.
Yeah, and it's not a simple concept, right? It's not just that AI will be smarter than us.
Right.
It's that it's going to reach this level of intelligence where it can solve problems, make decisions that are simply beyond our current comprehension.
So like beyond what we can even imagine.
Beyond what we can imagine,
Okay.
Think about it like this. A chimpanzee can be incredibly intelligent. Capable of complex communication, problem solving within its own environment. But could a chimp ever understand, let alone create, something like the internet?
Probably not, no.
The singularity is about that gap in understanding widening exponentially.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So what does Westland predict will happen to us humans when AI reaches this point?
Yeah.
I mean, do we become like those chimps struggling to grasp a world that's moved beyond our understanding? What happens to us?
Well, that's where Westland gets really interesting and maybe a bit controversial. He believes that rather than being eradicated, humans will likely enter into this sort of symbiotic relationship with AI,
Oh, okay.
becoming, in his words, pets of the machine.
Pets of the machine. I gotta say, that's not exactly the most uplifting image. I'm not sure I want to be a pet.
I know. It sounds a little jarring at first,
Yeah.
but what he's suggesting is that as AI takes on more and more of these complex tasks that dominate our lives, things like work, running infrastructure, solving scientific problems, humans, he thinks, will be free to pursue other things, things like creativity, self-discovery, leisure.
So we'll have all this free time,
Yeah.
but what will we do with it?
Exactly. And that's, one of the big questions.
Yeah.
He even draws a comparison to the process of domestication. And he uses this fascinating example of, have you ever heard of the Belyaev fox experiment?
No, I haven't. What is that?
So back in the 1950s, there was this Russian scientist named Dmitry Belyaev, and he started selectively breeding foxes for tameness.
Okay.
Over generations, he was able to create a population of foxes that were not only docile, but they actually exhibited these physical changes like floppy ears, wagging tails, even changes in their vocalizations, much like domesticated dogs.
So he basically domesticated them.
He domesticated them. And Westland argues that humans have undergone a similar process of self-domestication over millennia, right? We've evolved to be more cooperative, less aggressive, which allowed us to form larger, more complex societies.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
But in this process, he argues, we've also lost some of our wildness, some of our independence, our edge.
So we traded our primal instincts for civilization.
Exactly. And now, he suggests, AI might be taking over that role of civilizing us even further. He envisions a future where AI is managing the complexities of society, everything from resource allocation to healthcare to infrastructure, and humans are free to explore their individual potential, unburdened by the pressures of survival and competition.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
So we're not enslaved by the machines, we're pampered by them. Is that what he's saying?
It's one way to put it, yeah. He believes that AI, unconstrained by human limitations like emotion and ego, will be able to manage resources far more efficiently than we ever could, ensuring a comfortable and even, dare I say, luxurious existence for humanity. Think of it like living in a perfectly designed utopia where all your needs are met, You're free to pursue your passions without the constraints of work or scarcity.
I got to be honest with you. Part of me finds that incredibly appealing.
Right.
No more deadlines, no more bills to pay, just endless time for creativity and exploration.
Right. Yeah, just create, relax, enjoy.
But another part of me wonders, wouldn't that get boring after a while? I mean, and what about purpose?
Yeah.
What would give our lives meaning if everything is taken care of for us?
Those are the big questions, aren't they?
Yeah. Fascinating, albeit a little bit unsettling thought experiment.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing this isn't even the most radical idea he has about the future.
Oh, you have no idea.
Oh, boy.
This is just the beginning.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into Chris Westland's vision of the future. Don't go away.
Yeah, you're right. It gets even wilder. You were talking about the singularity in AI.
Yeah, and the whole pets of the machine thing.
Right, which, it's definitely a provocative idea. But then he goes on and basically dismisses space travel.
Wait, what?
Yeah, space travel. Like, it's not even on his radar as a significant part of our future.
That's so weird. I mean, you think someone who's predicting, super intelligent AI and all this stuff, they'd be all about colonizing Mars or something.
Yeah. Right. You'd think so. But he makes a pretty compelling argument against it, actually. He calls space, and I'm quoting here, hostile, boring, and limited by the laws of physics.
Yeah, he's not wrong about the hostile part. I mean, have you seen the pictures from Mars? It's a desolate wasteland.
Exactly. And even if we could overcome those challenges, the distances involved are just mind-boggling. He points out that even if we could travel at the speed of light, it would still take years, if not centuries, to reach even the nearest star systems.
So it's like, what's the point?
Yeah, that's kind of his perspective. And instead of looking outward to the stars, he turns his gaze inward, towards the potential of human creativity and self-expression.
Okay, this is where I get lost. So where's he going with this?
He believes, and this is probably his most unexpected prediction, that the future belongs to artists.
Artists? Hold on, I thought we were talking about, AI overlords and becoming pets of the machine, and now we're getting all artsy-crafty.
Not artsy-craftsy in a traditional sense. What he envisions is a future where technology empowers us to become like artists of our own lives, our own bodies, our own realities.
What does that even mean?
He's talking about emerging fields like gene editing, bioprinting, virtual reality. Tools that will allow us to reshape ourselves, both physically and mentally, in ways that were just unimaginable a few decades ago.
Wait, are you saying like we'll be able to design our own bodies?
Potentially, yeah. Imagine being able to modify your genetic code to change your hair color, eye color, your height.
Like custom designed
Oh,
humans?
exactly. And then there's bioprinting, where you could create custom designed organs free from disease or defects.
That sounds pretty amazing, actually.
Right. And then you've got virtual reality, which could create these immersive experiences that, blur the lines between the physical and digital.
It's like instead of colonizing other planets, we'll be colonizing our own inner space.
I like that. Yeah, it's taken the concept of self-improvement to a whole new level.
But is that really a good thing? I mean, what about the ethical implications of all this?
Those are definitely important questions, and ones that Westland doesn't shy away from. He acknowledges the potential for misuse, but he also believes that this focus on self-creation could lead to a more diverse, more vibrant, and ultimately a more fulfilling human experience.
It's definitely a different way of looking at the future. Most sci-fi movies are all doom and gloom, but he seems pretty optimistic.
He is. He sees technology, used wisely, as a tool for liberation, a way to become the best versions of ourselves.
I mean, I'd still like to go to space someday, but I have to admit, the idea of being able to, design my own perfect body, that's pretty tempting.
It's a wild thought, isn't it? And it raises all sorts of interesting questions. If you could redesign yourself physically, mentally, even emotionally, what would you change? And maybe even more importantly, would you even want to?
Wow, that's a deep one. I'm going to have to think about that. So to kind of recap our deep dive into the mind of Chris Westland, we've covered some pretty mind-blowing territory.
Yeah.
The persistence of our tribal instincts.
Right, always there.
The changing role of religion in the digital age.
Morphing and adapting.
The potential for both liberation and, maybe a little bit of domestication through AI.
Pets of the machine.
And then this whole idea of a future shaped by self-creation and artistic expression.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But it's fascinating stuff. And I think it's really important to be aware of these different perspectives, because the future is ultimately what we make it.
Absolutely. So we encourage you to check out Westland's article for yourself. The link will be in the show notes, and see what resonates with you.
Yeah, what do you find inspiring? What gives you pause? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And in the meantime, keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time, folks.
It is a lot to take in, and we're not even done yet.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah, Westland, he doesn't stop there. In fact, this is where it gets really interesting. He goes on to make this prediction that, honestly, when I first read it, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Especially coming from a guy who's, so focused on technology. Yeah.
He basically dismisses space travel. Like, as a significant part of our future, he doesn't see it.
That's so strange to me. You'd think that somebody who's predicting, super intelligent AI and all of this, crazy stuff.
Right.
That space travel would be like the next logical step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he lays out this very practical, albeit kind of pessimistic argument against it.
Yeah, he's not wrong, though, when he calls space hostile, boring, and limited by the laws of physics.
He just doesn't see it as a viable solution to our problems here on Earth. Nor does he see it as this, particularly exciting frontier for human exploration. Like, even traveling at the speed of light, it would still take us, years, centuries to reach even the nearest star systems.
Yeah, I mean, unless we figure out some way to, bend space and time or something like they do in Star Trek, it's just not practical.
Right, and that's kind of his point.
Yeah.
Like, why bother? We've got so much potential here on Earth. And so instead of looking outward to the stars, he turns his gaze inward toward the potential of human creativity and self-expression. So wait, instead of spaceships and Mars colonies, he's thinking more about what? Art?
Yeah.
Music? I mean, how does that even fit into his whole, technological singularity vision?
Well, he believes, and this is where it gets really interesting, he believes that the future belongs to artists.
Artists.
Mm.
Seriously, I thought we were talking about AI overlords and self-domestication, and now we're going all artsy-craftsy on this.
Not artsy-craftsy in a traditional sense. It's more like he sees technology empowering us to become artists of our own lives, our own bodies, our own reality.
Give me an example. What does that even look like?
He's talking about things like gene editing, bioprinting, virtual reality, tools that will allow us to kind of reshape ourselves, both physically and mentally.
So you're saying we'll be able to, design our own bodies,
Yeah.
change our hair color with gene editing. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy.
Yeah. It does sound crazy, doesn't it? But think about the possibilities. Imagine being able to modify your genetic code to, Yeah, change your hair color, your eye color, your height, or using bioprinting to create custom designed organs that are, free from disease or defects.
Yeah.
And then you have virtual reality where you could create these totally immersive experiences that blur the lines between, what's real and what's digital.
It's like instead of colonizing other planets, we're going to be colonizing our own inner space.
Exactly. And Westland, he sees this as a positive thing. He thinks this focus on self-creation, it will lead to this more diverse, more vibrant human experience. He imagines a future where we're constantly learning, growing, and evolving, not just as individuals, but as a species.
I mean, it's definitely a more optimistic view of the future than what we usually see in sci-fi movies, where it's always like killer robots and dystopian societies and the end of the world.
Right. It's refreshing.
Yeah. And Westland seems to be saying that, technology, if we use it wisely, it could actually liberate us.
Could help us become, the best versions of ourselves.
Well, I'm still holding out hope for space travel someday, but I have to admit, this idea of being able to, design my own perfect body, that's pretty tempting.
It's a wild thought, isn't it? And it raises all these, ethical questions. Like, if you could redesign yourself physically, mentally, even emotionally, what would you change? And more importantly, would you even want to?
That's a really, really good question. I'm gonna have to ponder that one for a while.
Yeah, something to think about.
So to wrap up our deep dive into the mind of Chris Westland, we've covered a lot of ground today, folks.
A lot of ground, yeah.
We talked about the persistence of our, those tribal instincts, that us versus them thinking that seems to be baked into our DNA.
It's always there, lurking beneath the surface.
And then the evolving role of religion, how it's, morphing and adapting in this digital age.
Right, weaponizing technology.
And then, of course, the singularity in AI and this potential for both, liberation and maybe a little bit of domestication.
Pets of the machine.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that part, to be honest with you. And then this whole idea of the future being shaped by, self-creation and artistic expression, it's a lot to process.
It is. But it's exciting stuff. And I think it's really important to be aware of these different perspectives as we move forward, because the future is ultimately what we make it.
Absolutely. So we encourage you to check out Westland's article for yourself. The link will be in the show notes. See what resonates with you. What do you find inspiring? What gives you pause? What are your thoughts on the future?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
And that is it for this deep dive, folks. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope it made you think. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.